Good morning. That's pretty lame. It's Halloween, people. Ratchet it up. Yeah, much better. Thank you. Our opening words this morning are by our own Reverend Matt Alspaugh. Can you feel it in your bones, in the core of your animal being? Can you feel the shift of the sun, the change of the seasons? Even here in Mexico, the days become shorter and the nights longer. The nights are cooler. A surprising breeze appears at times. True, the trees don't yellow and lose their leaves. The birds are returning, not leaving. And the seasonal shift is from wet to dry. Can you feel it? The ancient wordless parts of us feel the harvest cycle, the culmination of growth, entrance into dry times, brown, gray, cool. Welcome to the seasons of darkness, interiority, and silence. Welcome to the seasons of death, a time not just for sadness, but celebration and joy. Come, let us worship together. And so I just want to welcome you with live, woo, from Fellowship Hall. It's our LCUUF Sunday service. Our announcements were on a slideshow before the service. If you didn't see them, don't worry about it. They'll be sent by email in the next day or so. A few notes. Our building is now open to all fully vaccinated participants. We will continue to offer our service on Zoom as we welcome people to the building. We ask people here to continue to wear their masks to help prevent the spread of breakthrough COVID infections. My name is Susan Miller. Dee Cahmi and I are service leaders today. Our main talk will be by our Reverend Matt Alspaugh. And at this time, I'd like to offer a special welcome to our visitors. If you are visiting with us for the first time or have reconnected with us after a long absence, we invite you to say your name. Dee will bring you the mic in the room and tell us where you're from. If you're on Zoom, use the Zoom raise hand feature or just turn your video on and wave your hand and we'll ask you to unmute. If you're in the room now here and would like to speak, please raise your hand and Dee will come see you. Stand up. Yeah. Yeah. Face it, yeah.
Hello, everybody. I'm Hanna Frederick. I'm a Hungarian-born American returning, after 2 years. That's what it took me due to COVID. After 19 Christmas, January 20, to get here. We came together with my husband, Howard, and that's my first day in person because he has passed away August 22nd before we could even move into our new house. But I want to say that I'm so happy to be here. Thank you. Welcome.
Cheryl. There she is. I'm calling her out. Yeah.
I'm Cheryl Swain, and I'm a member, but I haven't been here since February of last year. And I'm so glad to be back here. I just come back every now and then, and I'm here now. So it's good to be here.
Welcome. Anybody else? New?
Ann Morris, would you like to introduce yourself, Annie? Yeah, please. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Annie Morris, and I've been here for a couple of months now. Love the place, love the atmosphere, love the people, and thank you so much.
Welcome.
Okay, I think we're through in the room. And now it's time for Zoom.
Oh, say hi. My name is Derek. And Alex. And this is Alex. And we are coming to you from Houston, Texas.
Our chalice reading today, the words are from Mark Alstrom, and it was submitted by the Australian and New Zealand Unitarian Association, which is a part of the International Council of Unitarians and Universalists. I will read it in English and Spanish. A golden thread binds us all that has been and will ever be. Here the tender soul yearns. Here the greatest dreams are sighted. Here the sacred flame burns. Un hilo dorado nos une a todo lo que ha existido y a todo lo que existirá. Aquí la dedicada alma anhela. Aquí contemplamos los más grandes sueños. Aquí la llama sagrada arde. Now we will light our chalice with these words that we sing together. Okay. Our hymn is For All That Is Our Life, and Michael is going to play the audio recording. Green.
For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build a common good and make our own days glad. For needs which others serve, for services we give, for work and its rewards, for hours of rest and love, we came with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain, and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come in praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we all call to use to build a common good and make our own days glad.
Each week, we take time to remind ourselves that we belong to a community that cares for each other. We do this by sharing any significant joys or sorrows in our lives. If you have a joy or sorrow to share today, you can type it into the chat room now and we'll read those aloud. If you're in the room, please raise your hand and Dee Dee will bring you the microphone. First, let us voice our sorrows or concerns. Whatever you or the world may be holding, that is in need of our healing and caring thoughts. You are welcome to type sorrows and concerns in the chat box, and first we'll start with the folks here to give you on Zoom time to type. Are there any sorrows or concerns that people would like to share here in the room? It appears that all is well here in the room. Okay. Okay. Zoom?
I have one from David Hudnall for my cousin, Ken Hudnall, who lives in Dayton, Ohio. He is undergoing some rather invasive open heart surgery. Please light a candle of concern for him and his family as he undergoes treatment and recovery.
Now let us recall the joys. Whatever you may be celebrating, whatever evokes a feeling of joy for you or yourself or others or anybody, you're welcome to type joys in the chat box. Again, we will start with the people here. Are there any joys that people would like to share here in the room?
I'd like to light a candle of joy. I hope this is going to be a joy for all those that are participating in the climate change conference in Glasgow beginning today.
My name is Lou. Trudy and I are extremely pleased that our daughter-in-law Ruth has taken a job in Amsterdam at the University of Amsterdam, and our son is actually going there also. So we're real happy about that. It looks like we'll be going back to Europe again.
I'm Sharon, and this is my husband, Steve Wilson, and our joy is that in the last month since we've been here, we've sold our home in Davis, California, home of a Unitarian Universalist church, and we have bought and purchased and closed on a house in Upper La Floresta, and I also want a shout out to the community we've already built, Pam and Mario, Paul and Paula, and Joan Ward, who have really helped us in this transition and will continue. Thank you.
Welcome. I have a personal joy that is not shared by my husband. We now have a 9-week-old puppy. I think he thinks the puppy should be named Too Much Trouble, but her name is Scout. And this candle from our care team.
Hold it. We have.
Oh, I'm sorry. Zoom people, I forgot you. Let her rip.
We have joys first from Janice Kimball. It is my great joy that my sister Charlotte came home from the hospital yesterday in time to attend her art exhibition on Thursday at the Cultural Centers in Farmington Hills, Michigan. She is an 89-year-old artist who lives alone and was given a year to live 5 years ago. What an inspiration she is to me. And then from Liz Mulder, I have a great big joy. Sol Ramirez, the big sister of Belen, had a bouncing baby girl yesterday. Mother and baby doing very well. The mama Sol is finishing her thesis and will graduate from the University Tecnological on Libramento in January. She certainly has her hands full meanwhile. And then from Heidi McLennan, my joy is that I will finally undergo the long-awaited foot surgery next week. And that's it.
And this candle from our care team represents those sorrows that are too raw, too difficult for us to share aloud. So many of us have had losses: partners, children, grandchildren, losses that remain present with us every day. And so many of us have burdens of anger, fear, and frustration, all those things that weigh heavily on our hearts. We will light this candle for all those unspoken sorrows.
When Fred Kirtland asked me to speak about why we pledge, I did not hesitate to say yes. Even though I am the one speaking here, these are the pledge values that David and I both share. The definition of pledge is a solemn promise or understanding. We look at this as our promise or understanding to support LCUUF in any way that we can. We look at pledging through two different lenses. First, a pledge of financial support, and second, a pledge of time and energy. Both of these aspects of pledging have been extremely important to us from our beginnings as UUs, as we became members in 2002 of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spartanburg, South Carolina. In addition to our financial support, the pledging of time became almost as important. From the time we walked through the doors during our visit to Lake Japala in 2018, we were greeted by Liz Muller, Donna Burrows, and Karen Carpenter, to name a few, and we felt at home with family. And as a member of a family, we support it whether it be with money, time, or both. We had three criteria in finding a new home to retire. One, being close to an international airport. Two, have a strong cultural and theatrical community. And three, having a strong spiritual community. David and I lucked out by finding LCUUF, one of only 3 UU fellowships in Mexico. We choose to support LCUUF because of the work it does not only with the immigrant community, but especially with the Mexican community in need. This fellowship has donated 85,010 pesos through the end of September to the 4 organizations fighting food insecurity here in the Lakeside area. Your pledge helped to do that. David and I also choose to pledge our time to LCUUF. Pledging your time is very important, almost as important as your financial contribution. We need your help, especially as volunteers of committees here at LCUUF. David serves on the financial team with Lorna Dean. I have served on the Sunday Service Committee, have been a service leader for numerous services, as well as produced and presented lay services, and I produced slides that you see each week during the service. We both serve on the tech team, helping produce weekly services for Zoom. Producing these services costs money. By pledging, you help us to buy the equipment and technology needed to provide these services that reach people far and wide. Since I was here from the beginning of the Zoom services, I am happy to say that LCUUF had to only cancel 1 service during the entire pandemic. Not many congregations can say that. The early days were scary here, guys. We were doing it without internet, and we were doing it on hotspots. We've come a long way. By pledging, you are helping support your LCUUF family. So while you are thinking about what to pledge financially, please also consider how you can help physically with your time to the fellowship. Both are greatly appreciated. As you know, the pledge campaign is on the way and will continue through December 5th. We are asking everyone send your pledge by email to treasure@lakechapalauu.org or use the paper pledge forms on the welcome table and put it into the offering basket. State your pledge as an annual amount for the fiscal year starting February 1st, 2022. Be sure to designate whether it is your currency is in pesos, US, or Canadian dollars. As of Wednesday, October 27th, the pledge team is pleased to have received in total pledges 529,500 Mexican pesos from 22 pledging units. Our pledge thermometer shows that we are well on our way to our goal of 750,000 pesos. Thank you so much for your pledging.
This is the time in our service when we ask that you remember that we share our gifts through pledging and donations. Instructions for payments to the fellowship are on a slide during the announcements before the service every week. For the people here at the fellowship, we'll pass a basket, and Susan will pass the baskets. And while you're considering your gifts to the fellowship, remember that each month LCUUF donates 5,000 pesos or more to an organization providing food aid in our lakeside community. For the month of October, we've been supporting Food Bank Lakeside. This organization has given out thousands of despensas, bags of food and necessities to hundreds of poor families in the lakeside area. If you're not attending the fellowship in person, please donate to, quote, share the basket when you pay your pledge. Donate to share the basket separately or indicate what part of your donation is to share the basket. Thank you for your kind generosity. And Susan is going to continue passing the basket. And that works out. This reading is by Rainer Maria Rilke, who was a famous Austrian poet and novelist who wrote around the turn of the last century. He writes, "Death is our friend, our closest friend, perhaps the only friend who could never be misled by our ploys and vacillations. Death is our friend precisely because it brings us into absolute and passionate presence with all that is here. That is all that is natural and all that is love. Life always says yes and no simultaneously. Death, I implore you to believe, is the true yea-sayer. It stands before eternity and says only yes." Now Susan is going to read a poem by Khalil Gibran.
Our second reading is called On Death by Lebanese poet Khalil Gibran, who also wrote around the turn of the last century. You would know the secret of death. But how shall you find it unless you seek it in the heart of life? The owl, whose night-bound eyes are blind unto the day, cannot unveil the mystery of light. If you would indeed behold the spirit of death, open your heart wide unto the body of life. For life and death are one, even as the river and the sea are one. In the depth of your hopes and desires lies your silent knowledge of the beyond. And like seeds dreaming beneath the snow, your heart dreams of spring. Trust the dreams, for in them is hidden the gate to eternity. Your fear of death is but the trembling of the shepherd when he stands before the king, whose hand is to be laid upon him in honor. Is the shepherd not joyful beneath his trembling that he shall wear the mark of the king? Yet is he not more mindful of his trembling? For what is it to die but to stand naked in the wind and to melt into the sun? And what is it to cease breathing but to free the breath from its restless tides, that it may rise and expand and seek God unencumbered? Only when you drink from the river of silence shall you indeed sing. And when you have reached the mountaintop, then you shall begin to climb. And when the earth shall claim your limbs, then shall you truly dance.
Hello, everyone. I'm Matt Alspaugh. And I'm wanting to invite you into maybe what might be a little bit of a risky form of meditation today, a bit of a meditation, or really rather a contemplation on death. And so we might remember that we all here are bound together by two realities. All of us are alive, and all of us will one day die. Now, a scientific study at the University of Kentucky supports what mystics have long known, that thinking about death can actually make us happier. So we're going to do a little bit of that right now, if you want to. You don't have to. This is just a simple visualization, a kind of contemplation, an imagination of our own deaths, good death. So I invite you to kind of settle into a meditative position, however that might be for you, or just a space for contemplation. Get comfortable. You might close your eyes or just soften your vision and just notice your body and your breathing. And now bring into mind what a good death might be for you. Perhaps you're in a room with family and friends, with them maybe, holding your hand as you begin to pass from this realm. Or perhaps, it's very common, you might prefer to die alone, maybe when people step out of the room, or simply being alone. Or perhaps, knowing your future, knowing that perhaps you have some kind of incurable illness, you have this opportunity to take time to say goodbye to people, to repair relationships, to prepare yourself for what comes so that you might feel ready. Or perhaps you might prefer to be without awareness, that sort of sense of going to sleep one night, never waking up. All of these are possible paths to good death. So just visualize yourself in that final time, just for a minute or so. Those final moments, that final breath in this earthly realm. And now returning to this time in this place. And you might enjoy exploring this practice or other kinds of meditation on death. There are many of them, as a way to befriend death, and thus live your lives more fully.
Shortly after we moved here 9 years ago, I asked the parents of one of my grandchildren's friends if their children were going to dress up and go trick-or-treating. And they said a most emphatic no, saying it was just too creepy. Too much emphasis on scaring people and playing tricks on the unwary. A short time later, I shared pictures of our first Day of the Dead, as you see on the slide here to members of my family in the United States. They would not be quiet at how absolutely creepy they thought it was. The idea that spirits of the dead momentarily returned to the land of the living for a brief reunion really creeped them out. They could not accept my insistence that the holiday is a joyful one. This is the Ajijic Panteon during Day of the Dead festivities. When my family and I visited the Panteon for the first time, our granddaughter was 9 months old. Her father stood outside the Panteon and held her while the rest of us went inside. She could not enter the Panteon because she was unbaptized. Among many families here, unbaptized children do not enter cemeteries or forested areas or go around bodies of water because their souls are vulnerable to attack, I want to say by demons, but not really. It's more like a malicious elf. And I think this was the day that I realized that figuratively I was not in Kansas anymore. I was in a place where the population shared beliefs that were entirely foreign to me. The dead coming back just for a good time, the existence of bad spirits, the eating of sugar skulls, and bread covered with images of bones, and picnics and tequila in the cemetery. Now, this is what's familiar to me. This is Arlington National Cemetery on Memorial Day, and this is where my father is buried. And visiting the cemetery is a somber affair. There are no picnics, no mariachi bands, just sadness and dwelling on loss. I come from a people who do not really encourage the show of emotions, especially negative ones like sadness. In my family, we don't use the anniversary of the death of a loved one to talk about them or share jokes or funny stories or even to reflect on how they lived their lives. We do not celebrate that at one time they were among us. And sometimes we even hesitate to say their names for fear that doing so will make someone unhappy. But here, the dead are not forgotten, only to be remembered a few days at the end of the year. Prayers are offered for the 9 days after a person's death to help make sure that the person goes to heaven. And many families keep altars with candles and a photo of the deceased and offer daily prayers for the souls of the departed. The Nahua people of central Mexico believed that the deceased traveled on a year-long journey to the land of the dead, and they were assisted with food and water provided by the living. And this practice of the living helping the dead inspired the creation of altars, ofrendas, as well as the leaving of offerings at grave sites. The altars are my favorite part of Day of the Dead. Looking at families' altars with the pictures of the deceased, the foods and beverages they liked, the mementos of sports and events in their lives, helped me realize that they were real people who lived and were loved in return. The Day of the Dead has helped me change the way I feel when I reflect on the people I have lost. Remembering them as they lived, rather than dwelling on the fact that they are dead, seems to be a healthier way of accepting the fact that our lives here are transient. I do not know what lies beyond. I do know, however, that I will probably rest much easier if my family and my friends think of me with joy in their hearts, some of my favorite foods, and their favorite adult beverages in their hands.
Several of us visited the grave of Monica Devine on Thursday and spruced it up for Dia de los Muertos. As most of you know, Monica was a fellowship member who died this summer under complicated circumstances. She was buried per state requirements in the Chapala Pantheon. And if you want to come to the Chapala Pantheon on November 2nd, which is the day of the public celebration of Dia de los Muertos, please contact me, and as I plan to be there, and I'll help you find Monica's grave. It's not easy to get to. Now, about Dia de los Muertos, do we really believe that our dead people drop back on November 1st and 2nd to have a snack and raise a glass with us before continuing on their journeys, as Susan suggested? I suspect that most of us don't really find that explanation literally believable, even though many of us find that the idea as folklore appealing and heartwarming. Certainly, we've observed that people approach death here in Mexico differently, more joyfully, and in my mind, more healthily than we do north of the border. We may not agree with the beliefs that are held by many Mexicans, but here's the thing. Beliefs are important. From beliefs come actions. I'm impressed with the actions, the behaviors, the sentiments about death in the Latin cultures, and these emerge from those beliefs. From beliefs come actions. Now, certainly many Christian believers take much comfort in a belief about heaven where they will see all their relations. Many of the more liberal of those Christian believers, including most Christian Unitarian Universalists, take comfort in the idea that heaven is open to everyone, no exceptions. This, of course, is the universalist idea that forms the second part of our name. This universalizing belief draws people together, connecting them with a common end. But could beliefs about the hereafter be harmful? Consider the beliefs of certain Christian evangelicals that the end times will soon be upon us, that the rapture is near. As a consequence, many of these evangelicals are less likely to support efforts to address climate change. As one writer put it, some evangelicals argue that global warming is of little concern when the end times are approaching. Indeed, it could even be proof of it. From beliefs come actions. And yet, I want to very much avoid Christian bashing here. Let me try to be an equal opportunity basher. So consider the beliefs in reincarnation or rebirth, and in karma, the fruits of past actions, good or bad. Karma can extend from life to death to new life. These are concepts found in most forms of Hinduism, Buddhism, as well as in certain New Age traditions. Could such beliefs be harmful? Such beliefs could easily lead us to excuse the mistreatment of other people. After all, their problems are theirs because they did something wrong in the past life. I understand that in India, the reason that the caste system remains so pervasive is because of the theology of reincarnation, which implies that there is a way to advance into the higher castes. If you are born as a low caste individual, just suck it up, and you'll get your ticket stamped in your next lifetime. Now, I am sure that many of you humanists here, you are sitting there quite smug, thinking, I don't believe any of this afterlife stuff. But beliefs still matter. especially beliefs about the future after your own life is done. You humanists might be particularly interested in a recent philosophical controversy over an area of philosophy called long-termism. This long-termism is a recently developed moral worldview which suggests that we should focus our attention on the very long-term future of humanity or its descendants. Thousands, millions, maybe even billions of years in the future. Sounds sensible, right? Long-termism has garnered special appeal and financial support from many of the gentry of high tech, including Elon Musk and Peter Thiel. In a recent article entitled Against Long-Termism, writer and philosopher Phil Torres argues that while a long-term view is good in many moral situations, a too long-term view can be morally harmful. For example, Torres notes that many of the long-termists don't see climate change as much of a problem. Didn't we just hear that already? It's just a blip in the grand scheme of things. But his main concern is that long-termism leans heavily on utilitarianism, that moral idea of the greatest good for the greatest number. So, if there is a moral choice that could potentially harm some number, maybe a million or a billion people currently alive, probably the ones south of the equator, that's okay, as long as it creates the likelihood of some greater good, perhaps for some kind of interplanetary, some kind of interplanetary or interstellar future for trillions of humans, perhaps even engineered transhuman cyborgs, perhaps living out their lives in, what is it? Not Facebook anymore. Is it Meta, a simulation? It sounds like a bad science fiction movie to me. It's about a dystopian universe where the ends justify the means. And from beliefs come actions. Some of these long-termists have proposed, and I quote, means like global invasive surveillance of every person on the planet in real time, or even preemptive violence and war to push their agenda. Now, admittedly, I have a little bit of bias against this philosophy, but beliefs matter. Returning to the Mexican beliefs about death, I think those beliefs do matter as well, for they bring a greater closeness among the people and a healthier attitude toward our own finitude. In fact, rather than seeing dying as a thing to be feared and death as a failure, perhaps we might see death in a more positive light. The great German poet Rainer Maria Rilke wrote a letter to a friend only a couple years before Rilke, died. In that letter, he said, "Death is our friend, our closest friend." In fact, telling us that death keeps us honest and keeps us alive. Rilke implies that embracing death, befriending it, may be more valuable than merely embracing life. For death alone allows us to face eternity. Death alone, he says, stands with us before eternity and says yes. And if from beliefs come actions, then believing that death is our friend might allow us to live lives free of the fear of death, to be more engaged with life, more fully loving life. In a way, that great poet Khalil Gibran is right. We can come to know the secret of death. We find death where we seek it, as he says, in the heart of life. We simply have to have the courage to become familiar with death, to make death a friend, just as we have become familiar and comfortable with life. For as Gibran tells us, life and death are one, even as the river and the sea are one. And he ends with a lovely metaphor. When your life comes to an end, when you have crested the mountain, then he says, when you have reached the mountaintop, then you shall begin to climb. May we, in our own times, reach the mountaintop and there begin to climb and sing and truly dance. Woo-hoo. And now, what has become a tradition here at LCUUF is a slideshow of our fellowship members, family members, and friends who have departed from this earthly realm. May you find joy and solace in it, and blessed be. Our hymn is Comfort Me.
Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Sing with me, sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul. Sing with me, sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul. Speak for me, speak for me, speak for me, oh my soul. Speak for me, speak for me, speak for me, oh my soul. Dance with me, dance with me, dance with me, oh my soul. Dance with me, dance with me, dance with me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul.
Let us extinguish our chalices with these words which we read together. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth. the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we keep in our hearts and share with all the world.
Our closing words are by Reverend Ken Collier. I do not know where we go when we die, and I do not know what the soul is, or what death is, or when or why. What I know is that the song once sung cannot be unsung, and the life once lived cannot be unlived, and the love once loved cannot be unloved. Go in peace, everyone. Now our postlude.